Stephanie Wittels Wachs is the host of the podcast Last Day, which is also the title of her new book, which we're going to get into in our conversation. Her first book was a memoir called Everything is Horrible and Wonderful. And Steph is also the co-founder and CEO of Lemonada Media, which is the podcast network that I've been with for the last year or so. Steph's new book is really such a gift to us. It's a vital guide for living with addiction, for connecting with loved ones who have this disease, and for saving lives, and really for evolving our culture more broadly. I so wish that Steph didn't have to write this book and that her brother, who died a decade ago from an opioid overdose, was still here with her. And again, I'm so grateful for what she's sharing now. There are so many compelling, helpful, and really practical things we could all be doing. So I hope you'll keep listening. Also, I should say, Steph is really fun. This one is essential for me. Here we go. Well, we're going to roll because there's so much to say. Okay. And I will start by saying, thanking you for this gift. And don't be upset, but I already sent this galley to a friend in crisis with a sibling. And because for all of the ink spilled about addiction and all of its variations, and there's so much great stuff out there, and I will include everything in the show notes, all the episodes that we've done here on this show in particular, that it's still so not well understood. It's so paralyzing to find yourself in that situation, and old stories die hard in this space, particularly when you love someone who is in trouble and needs help. And this idea of like, you can't do that, it's codependent. There's so much poor information out there that's landed in our psyches. Yeah. So thank you for this book. It needs to exist.
Listen, the fact that you've already passed it to somebody, that's the goal. That's it.
That's it, right?
Like, that is why I wrote it. So thank you for helping me achieve the goal.
Yeah. And I will send her I will buy a finished copy to compensate you for the free copy that I distributed without your consent. I'm kidding.
As an author. Only an author would.
But this is just to get that out there at the top of this episode. If you or someone you know or love, and chances are you are in this population, is afflicted by this disease or contending with this disease. And if they're contending with it now, they'll be contending with it in 10 or 20 years. Unfortunately, it's chronic.
Chronic illness.
This is a fantastic, clear-eyed guide through the landscape with tons of resources too. So I was like, look up Treatment Atlas. You know, she's desperately trying to find a place for her sibling to go. And
absolutely.
So anyway, there's tons in there. All right, so let's dig into it. So thank you, Steph.
My heart is so warm. My heart is so warm. The fact that you just called it a disease, you said it was a chronic illness. I'm like, yes.
Yes. And, and I think part of, in the last series that I did about this with people like Carl Eric Fisher's an addiction MD, I don't know if you've met him, but he talks about it as this binary thinking that's very problematic. He himself is in recovery. Carrie Wilkins, you write about, who I think for anyone who does the Center for Motivation and Change and has a workbook called Beyond Addiction, and for family members, she is your person because even let's start there with this idea that, and I'm so sorry you had to write this book. I will also say I'm so sorry that your brother is not here with us.
Thank you. Sucks.
It sucks.
I hate it. I hate it actively every single day of my life. Yeah. It's terrible. And I don't want anyone to have to experience this. And you just said 25 things that I want to respond to. But one of them is that, when you're thrust into this moment where there is no rule book, there is no manual, there is no how-to, people don't talk about it. So nobody shares their experience because it's so shameful. It's so stigmatized. All you want to do is help. And you realize you have no idea how. I mean, I remember just Googling rehab. That was the only thing I knew to do. And there is such a lack of resources, I think, for families. And so that paralysis that you mentioned is so intense. That paralysis of, oh my God, and feeling just totally shocked, totally stuck. and
Yeah.
wanting to act and truly not being able to move.
Well, one of the reasons that I think you're so paralyzed from taking action is this very insistent programming, which on some level is well intentioned, because I don't think you can help someone who isn't willing to help themselves.
Nope.
And this very insistent voice saying to intervene or assist in any way is enabling. It's not loving. The best thing you can do is rock bottom these people and let them end up on the street. And it's terrible advice. It is not scientifically sound or supported. And
it is the worst advice. And in fact, now, and I want to say this up top because I feel like everyone needs to hear this. When it comes to the opioid crisis specifically, and with fentanyl and the drug supply, letting somebody hit rock bottom is an actual death sentence, right?
Yes.
So that's the other part, is that rock bottom stuff, completely flawed, unscientific, all of the things you just said, and ineffective, frankly. But when it comes to these really powerful opioids, if you use alone, if you are cut off from your people, your family, your community, people who love you, and you are hiding and you are using by yourself because you are hitting rock bottom, there is a real chance that you are going to OD. And if you OD and you are by yourself, you are going to go into respiratory depression, and no one will be there to assist you with naloxone, to revive you, to bring you back. It is actually deadly to use alone. And so I want to emphasize that because it's a really shitty frame, number one, but also quite dangerous. I just want to say that.
Yeah. And I know someone close to me also died of, and we're going to talk about MOUDs and medications because people don't realize that these exist and that they're incredibly efficacious. A family member of mine died from alcohol addiction. It can also kill you, but there's nothing like what's happening with opioids and fentanyl. And I was talking to people come to me as like a clearinghouse for advice on rehabs and resources now. And so I was talking to someone about sex addiction, which is probably maybe the most stigmatized of all of them. And, it's tough. It's not a victimless crime, right?
Yep.
It's a family systems issue with like a lot of relational damage. And, and I was like, so there is a road here of I'm out of here unless you take this incredibly seriously and heal yourself, which is not possible if we're talking about harder substances. Yes, to your point, where you don't want to find your partner, your child, your parent dead. So that's the main thing, like harm reduction. How do we keep people alive and give them as many chances as possible to get the help they need to put themselves into remission?
And keeping that tether is actually the way to go, because if you sever that, my husband, he's a brilliant designer, and I made him make me these t-shirts. They say care instead of dare, and they're in the dare font. And then they say, instead of keep kids off drugs, they say unconditional love and radical acceptance, because that is truly if I were to say, like, what's the takeaway from all of it? What's the thing that I didn't understand and that I've been I never use the word blessed, Elise, but I feel like I'm blessed that I have talked to all these harm reduction advocates over the years who have just really shown me the way. And I am fully buying in to the cult. It's like, it's the way to go. But truly loving somebody through an experience like that, and like you said, keeping them safe and alive, giving them more opportunities to turn it around when they decide they want to, not on my timeline, but on theirs, is the way we have to do it. And then the stuff you've already mentioned, medication, Narcan, things like this.
Yeah.
These are things we have to do from a harm reduction angle to decrease harm, to keep people safe, to keep people alive, and then to do the hard work of figuring out why they're using in the first place, and, to get help when they're ready, and then to be there along the way. And here's the other thing. It's going to be really fucking hard and really uncomfortable for me as the family member. It would be much easier. This is like the part that I feel like is, you're not supposed to say, but it's really inconvenient when somebody you love is in the throes of active addiction. It is embarrassing, shameful, inconvenient, not on your timeline. Like it's a real frustrating. Why aren't they doing what I want them to do? It's really hard. I think the harder choice is to stay in that unconditional love and acceptance place. It's harder. But you mentioned Carrie Wilkins, like there are resources available to help people know how to do that because it's very difficult. And when you're in it, it's easy for me to say on the other side, my brother's not here anymore. It's easy for me to say, just love them through it. When I was in it, when I was in it with him, it was wildly frustrating, right? I think it would have been the harder solution for me to just, be like, all right, you're a drug user. I'm here for you. I'm here for you while you're on that journey,
Yeah.
Tough.
Well, it's very difficult because it's presented exclusively as this choice in our culture. It's very difficult to relate to it as a choice if you don't have that trigger for developing in you as a disease, right? So it is very confounding to people who are like, I don't have a problem with this. You can stop.
Yes.
And we don't know, right? Like you write about trauma and the work of Gabor Mate. That's obviously a massive factor. Sensitivity, ADHD, undiagnosed ADHD, they think is an underlying culprit or sort of a preloaded gun. We don't really understand in the same way that we don't understand why, like, I get cancer and you don't. Mm-hmm. But relating to it as an unfortunate disease is more helpful and something that needs long-term care, like diabetes. It's not like you go to rehab and you're done. You're out of triage, but
that's right.
The work begins.
And that is actually why I start the book at that. Chapter 1 is Addiction's a Disease. Right out of the gate. The first part of the book is called What We Got Wrong, because we get a lot wrong. And I purposely started there because if you don't accept that first, none of this makes sense. And I'm glad you pointed that out, because if I'm thinking, okay, my brother is making this really horrible choice, right? This is a matter of willpower. This is a matter of you just can't get your shit together. Then of course it feels selfish and all the adjectives we ascribe to people who are struggling with this. If we change the framing, and I think this is really helpful for families, if I had thought of my brother's addiction as a disease, like a cancer, like a diabetes, like something he does not have control over, that we need to treat and manage with long-term care, with medication, with all of the ways that we know and compassionately treat disease, I think it would have been a different story. So I think you have to start there, and it is a real framework issue because we've been told from when we were little, just say no, right? It's that easy. Just say no. And if you don't say no, you're bad. You're a bad person.
Yeah. Well, that binary thinking of you're an addict or you're not, even the definition of someone as an addict, like you don't say like, Elise, you're a cancer, right? Totally. You're an addict or you're not. And which then cuts off what we also see in like less dire straits, which is you look at our culture now and you look at the way that people have just dramatically curbed their own drinking. And it wasn't through identifying, particularly since COVID, and some of it's GLP-1s and things like that. But a lot of it was this without pushing people into a framework of like, you're an alcoholic, but to say, why don't you just try and moderate your use, which is a tenet of harm reduction, which is very difficult for us to say when something is problematic, right? Just see if you can control your use, and maybe you go from a bottle of wine a night to one without smacking a label on people. And 100%. I found, talking to friends, like so many of them, after the fact, were able to say, I had a really problematic relationship with drinking. But if you had said, you're an alcoholic, I would have, and you have to be sober for the rest of your life, I would have flipped a table on you. Meanwhile, like I've just sort of naturally taken my use down to the point where I don't I don't stand in opposition to alcohol. I'm not in a battle, but I don't drink anymore just because I don't I feel better. And you're like, look at that. That is like a system coming into homeostasis through support and love and non-judgment and personal and agency rather than, you have a problem, Melinda, go to rehab.
We don't do that. It is a real like societal problem. We don't know how to look at something in the gray. Stephen Murray, who I interviewed for the book, who was a, former, well, he still characterizes himself as a drug user.
I like that he does this. It's it's interesting. Yeah.
It's amazing. I know. He's taught me so much, but he really kind of blew my mind. He's like, look at all the degrees of drinkers in your life, right? You don't have someone who's just a zero, doesn't drink anything, or just like a complete alcoholic. You have your weekend warriors, you have your people that just drink on special occasions, you have people who don't drink at all, but not because they're alcoholics, it's because they get migraines or they're pregnant or whatever, You have people who drink a glass of wine with dinner every night. You have people that drink a whole bottle every night. And then you have people that you don't even know are drinking right when they wake up in the morning until they go to bed. There is a degree to everything. But when it comes to substances, to certain, and the other thing is, culturally, we do accept drinking, right? Drinking is socially acceptable. When it comes to drugs, we have this, well, hard drugs are not, right? So when we start talking about safe supply, a lot of the reason why people are dying of overdose is that we are dealing with a drug supply that is incredibly contaminated. In other countries, and when we look at alcohol, when we were doing prohibition and alcohol had like wood chips and ethanol in it or whatever it was, paint, people were dying because it wasn't regulated. Now it is regulated, and people do still die of alcoholism, obviously, severe drinkers after, a lot of chronic use. But when I buy a bottle of wine at the grocery store, I know that it's safe. I know that it doesn't have poison in it. We could get into that because I know it kind of does have poison in it. But
it's not great for you, but it's not you're not going to die.
Yeah, you're not going to die. You're not going to
the same way that
dead.
So many things are not great for us, and we're not in the business of telling people that they can't have them.
Exactly. And we've started to do this with marijuana, right? You've got dispensaries, you've got this. It's like, it's just interesting what we are able to say, okay, that is acceptable and that is not acceptable, right? We can't even begin to talk about safe supply when it comes to a heroin or an opioid or something like that, because again, it's and again, if you would have told me 10 years ago, I would have said, well, we would never be having this conversation. Safe supply? I would never be saying something like this. It seems so radical, but it's actually quite practical. It decreases death.
And we do have a safe supply of opioids. Care
that we
of
use
the Sackler
in
family.
hospitals.
Yeah, 100%. And for epidurals. But and yes, it's like it is these degrees where then anyone listening is like, oh my God, you can't readily make Oxy available, in part because there are so many people who become unwittingly addicted to these substances through chronic pain maintenance. So they are very sticky. So yes, like we're not suggesting that something like that, which captures people. But to your point, there are, we have this massive fentanyl problem. And that was a really interesting, I haven't gone into, that was an interesting short part of the book in terms of what's happening at the border. And, you give Trump some snaps in terms of trying to curb this problem. But it's wild to understand that now the Chinese are breaking it down into its component parts so they can ship the flour and not the bread. And it's just a morass of.
You're just never going to do it. You're never, ever, ever going to curb supply. You won't. I had this guy, Dr. Casey Grover, show me. I have this here because I was doing it. This is 2,000 doses of fentanyl could
in
fit
a
in a tiny packet, right? 2,000 doses and could wipe out 2,000 people essentially, right? It used to be that it would take a pound of heroin to do that. So do you know how easy it is for this stuff to get in? It's nothing. It's like rice grains, smaller than rice grains. And so when you think about that and you think about all of the drugs that are coming through, Ben Westhoff, who I interviewed in that part of the book, he was like, it's like draining the ocean with a paper cup or trying to drain the ocean with a paper cup. It is a ridiculous prospect. And so what can we do? Instead of spending $68 billion on drug interdiction, how can we help people with demand? Why are we not addressing demand? And that's what I get into in the last part of the book is that, and this is where you talk about trauma and all the reasons people are using, and you look at all the problems we have here, and you're like, yeah, there's a lot that's causing people pain. And drugs aren't something people use to feel bad. They're something they use to feel better. So, Gabor says, not why the addiction, but why the pain. And so I don't know. I think we're so far away from this culturally. But if we could get to a place where we are addressing the root causes of people using drugs and alcohol in a problematic way, I think we would get further than trying to throw billions of dollars, light them on fire, essentially, trying to keep drugs from coming in.
Yeah. And, to Gabor's point, why the addiction, why the pain, but also like, because I think for some people, and you write about this in the context of your brother, like you guys had this sort of wonderful, from your perspective, vantage point, incredible childhood. It's just a very sensitive, very funny, very successful comedy writer. And I think that, and we don't understand all the mechanisms, but we also know people who are like, I can't figure out why I'm driven because I can't isolate something in my childhood that I'm trying to escape. But for whatever reason, this feels incredibly good for my nervous system. And then it tips right into this terrible, destructive, crashing, craving, disaster.
Totally.
Where withdrawal is this horrible, monstrous specter that people just like can't get through on their own, right?
That's
so
right.
You're running from withdrawal is really
right.
It's like something flips.
Exactly.
It's not so fun.
No.
But let's talk about all of the aids that exist that are stigmatized in part because we live in this binary purity. You got to be clean or bust. But there are, starting with methadone, which is problematic in its own right. And it's kind of fascinating how it came to be. You have to go to the clinic every day, blah, 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 highly regulated. But Suboxone, buprenorphine, like all these, and drugs for cocaine, drugs for alcohol, that block receptors and keep people from dying.
Yeah, and craving.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, it's amazing. I mean, they use these drugs obviously to detox people under medical supervision. When you go to a detox, they're using these medications. But like, they have been around for a long time since, the 1940s. Methadone came over, around World War II. And, it started being used as a treatment aid, essentially, in the 60s. And it's the oldest one we have, but we have so much evidence on its efficacy. And then there's been, modern innovation. So there's naltrexone, which is what people prescribe for alcohol use disorder. This guy, Percy Menzies, who I interview in the book, who's such a character, he's like, I think we should put it in the water supply. I think it should be, it would just help with so many issues. It curbs cravings and all of that. And when people get it for opioid use disorder, it's often called Vivitrol, and you get like an injection monthly. There is, like you say, buprenorphine. A drug like Suboxone is a buprenorphine and naloxone combination. When you hear people talk about Narcan, they're talking about naloxone. It's just brand name and not brand name, generic. But all of these medications, like you said, they sit on your opioid receptors and they basically block them. When I went to my daughter's, I live in a very progressive school district that, yesterday my friend who works at the district office sent me a photo. They were passing out naloxone outside the district office and people were taking it. They do, this guy, Casey Grover, who I interviewed for the book, he does drug training for fifth graders. So I went to my daughter's fifth grade presentation with Casey, and I administered Narcan to him right there in the room in front of the fifth graders. And
he did nasal spray.
It's a nasal
just
spray.
Shoot it up there.
And
I have Narcan.
Back, yes. He jumped back on his feet and he's like, see, look, she just put it in my nose and I'm fine. If you do it to somebody and they're not, experiencing an overdose, it's totally safe. But he did this really funny presentation for the kids that has stuck with me, where he had one kid sit in a chair and then he had another kid try to push them out, right? And he's like, that is the person sitting on the chair, that other guy can't sit in the chair because it's taken. The chair is taken. And that's what these opioid blockers do, essentially. They block the receptor so that if you use while you are on one of them, you can't experience a feeling of high. You can't, you don't have these cravings. It sort of turns it off. It turns the volume down,
Yeah.
And you do, of course, have like misuse in some cases, but when used as prescribed, these drugs are so effective. And it's like I've been on thyroid medication. I don't need forever. I'm going to always be. My mom's been on it forever. What I have to take my medication. It should be no different for these drugs.
I'm on a statin and thyroid medication.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Me too. I'm on a statin too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like my levels are fantastic on the statin. I could eat leafy greens, Elise, every single day of my goddamn life. And if I wasn't on that statin, my numbers would look crazy because genetically.
Same. Yeah. You can't affect a genetic.
No, you can't.
What's it called? Hyper, whatever.
Yes.
I have the same thing.
Okay, good.
My whole family does. So yes.
Yeah. And
I have to be on a statin, otherwise I'll die.
Exactly. Yes. In 20 years or so.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I think when you reframe again the disease framework and you say, okay, this is a chronic illness, what other condition would we say, don't use that medication? Cancer patient, no. Don't go to chemo. What are you doing? You need to white knuckle your way to health.
Statins are a good proxy because we live in this sort of like kind of puritanical culture where some people, I don't know, are terrified of statins. It's like, no, they're life-saving interventions, and sure, clean up your diet if your cholesterol is responsive to that.
Yes, and
create all the healthy habits, and taking Lipitor or Simvastatin before I go to bed is like not a big deal, right? So small price to pay, and I understand, why someone's like, I don't want to get on Suboxone and be on it for the rest. I understand. And they're sticky drugs and they're hard to stop taking, et cetera. But your brother might be alive, right? A lot of lives could and would be saved if people knew about these drugs, were willing to take them. And if AA and NA and some of these Puritan-based cultures weren't so totally wild about saying, like, if you take this, you're not clean and you don't get to be part of this program.
I know. It's I definitely make sure in the book and in the podcast, I interview people who have found great success with 12-step recovery.
Yeah.
And that is an absolute godsend for some people, and I tell their stories. And then there are other people in the book who it has not worked for. And not only that, but they were told, like you said, they're not totally clean. They're breaking the rules, feeling like they're doing something wrong. I think 12-step is historically sort of steeped in if you're on anything, you're not totally sober. And that is a shame. I think it's changing. I do. I think but I don't think we're quite there yet.
Yeah. And I have friends who owe their lives to AA or NA. I have friends, though, who don't go into the program and would probably benefit from it because they are recovering drug users and they drink. And so they go to an AA. They can't go to AA, even though it's like more their people, because they are not completely clean of all substances. I mean, coffee is a substance. But I hope in time, like within the harm reduction framework, that people become a little less unyielding about what this looks like and are more focused on, like, how do we keep everyone alive and give people a shot?
Well, it also is an interesting debate because it goes back to this all or nothing thing. And it goes back to the idea that if you have a disease, it's not like my doctor is going to say, okay, you have this disease. I'm going to treat every single one of my patients with this disease the same. You are going to have an individualized treatment plan based on your genetics, your needs, your all of your like special snowflakes things about being a human being. Everyone isn't prescribed the same treatment plan. So again, 12-step works for some, it doesn't work for others. 12-step with medication works for some, doesn't work for others. We need to have a more flexible mindset here. It's not like if you take medication and you're in 12-step, you're threatening my recovery, but it feels that way to a lot of people, right? There's one way to do it, and it's the way I did it. And that's where you sort of get into that.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit more about so for people who are listening who don't know about medication, essential, but let's talk about I love the story. I know it's been sort of rebranded about Never Use Alone now, or Safe Spot, which I guess is the.
Yep.
Will you tell people about sort of that as a really important harm reduction strategy?
My favorite hotline in America. Only second to the Trader Joe's comments line. Yeah, it's kind of incredible. So I heard this episode of This American Life. It's called The Call. It's a gorgeous episode. I was gardening. I was weeping. I mean, truly, it is a beautiful episode. Act 1 features a nurse who worked for a overdose prevention hotline called Never Use Alone. And her name's Jessie B. And she has it's a shame that it was written into a book because if you could hear her gorgeous Georgia dialect, it is the best thing I've ever heard. It's like a song. But Jessie basically is reviving somebody who is calling the hotline, right? Somebody calls, her name is Kimber. She's checking in with Kimber. Kimber basically says, hey, I'm about to use. Jessie says, what are you going to use? How much? Okay, great. Make sure that you have a clear pathway. Give me your address. Make sure the doors aren't locked. Make sure you don't have animals that are going to get away. And basically, Jessie stays on the phone while Kimber uses. And then when Kimber stops responding because she's gone into respiratory depression, Jessie says, Kimber, Kimber, Kimber. Kimber doesn't respond. She calls EMT. EMT come. Jessie hears that they're there. She hangs up. The EMT who shows up is my friend Stephen Murray. And Stephen, it's just an incredible story. He was an EMT. He was feeling this huge toll during COVID, right? I mean, he was just like, it was just a bloodbath for EMTs and emergency responders during that time. And, a lot of the calls that Stephen would get were overdoses. And he thought, I want to go upstream. I want to stop pulling bodies out of the river. I want to figure out like why they're falling into the river in the first place. And so he really got interested in addressing this crisis from a public health perspective. So he goes back to school, becomes, graduate school for public health in Boston, and ends up basically in collaboration with Boston Medical Center creating Safe Spot, which is a more professionalized version of Never Use Alone. And it has funding, it has nonprofit funding, state funding. Again, it's run through BMC. Like it is a very legitimate operation. They are scaling into other states. And the first person that Stephen ever hired as a full-time employee was Kimber, who was revived on that call. And I interview all of them for the book. And Jessie works for Safe Spot. Kimber works for Safe Spot. It is a miraculous organization. And what I love most about it, there's so many things I love about it, but what I love most about it is that he says, like, really honestly, very few calls end in overdose. It's basically just hanging out with people. It's basically just like what we talked about at the beginning of our conversation. It's like connection. It's community. It's like these people that can call when their families have like forsaken them and said, you suck, I want nothing to do with you. You can call Safe Spot and you're going to be treated with love and compassion. And, it builds people's self-esteem, builds people's confidence, makes people feel like, okay, I have people that care about me in this world,
Yeah.
It's like very beautiful. And I tear up every time I talk about it because I just wish, my brother had access to something like this. It is a
Yeah.
real intervention that really does make a difference. And it's life-saving. Yeah,
Yeah. And most people who suffer from, we're sort of fed a Hollywood version, and this obviously exists, of people sort of like shooting up collectively in a crack house or whatever, but most users are doing it by themselves. It's a shameful secret.
totally.
They're in hiding. And so this is a way for them to not die.
That's right.
And which really should be. And I think it was Jesse, I can't remember the story, but essentially it goes into this Carrie Wilkins conversation about not enabling, about this idea of codependency and enabling and blah, 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 blah. But essentially she was like, my boundary script around this, if it's a child, I think her daughter struggled, was right. If you die in my house, I would need to die too. And
I would have to burn it to the ground.
I would have to burn it to the ground. And so if you are going to use in this house, the door needs to be open.
That's right.
And I need to be able to check on you. And
that's the boundary.
That's the boundary.
And it sounds so radical, right? What? I would allow my child to use heroin or fentanyl while I'm there? I mean, I remember when I was a teenager, right? Like you had like at my house, it was like my parents were like, if you're going to drink, do it here, and there was like two camps of parents. I feel like it was like parents who were like, had their eyeballs open and they were like, you're going to drink, please don't drive, stay here, do it safely. Like I prescribe, that's my church. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, let me know what you're doing so you can be safe. And that was the real aha moment that Jesse had, right? Jesse was like, I spent so much time trying to convince this child, KB, her daughter, to stop using drugs, right? I tried and tried. It came to a head in a Krispy Kreme parking lot. They got into an actual bloody fist fight. And Jessie tells the story so beautifully, but she's like, KB just starts screaming at her, like, what do you want from me? What do you want from me? And Jessie said, I just don't want you to die. Please don't die. If you could just please not die. That's what I would like. And that was a moment where it snapped. It basically, it hit her like a ton of bricks. She's like, oh, that's the goal. I've been trying to change her and to get her to be sober and to get her to do all the things I want her to do on my timeline. But really, I just don't want her to die. And that reframe is kind of like freeing and powerful because I think back to my own brother. Yeah, if he would have said to me, hey, I'm going to use, can I be on the phone with you? And then I could have called EMT for him and he could have been revived. I'd take that option because I bet you he would have hit a point where he was going to be really tired of this bullshit that he was doing. It was not pleasant. It wasn't good for him. Like he was not in a good place. But until he reached that point, oh, if I would have just said, I just want you to be alive. Like, why that's all there is. It's very easy. It's like very black. That's actually quite black and white.
Yeah.
We know we're talking about like the gray areas. It's actually quite black and white. If I'm going to take you not alive or alive, I'm going to take alive.
Take alive.
What do we need to do?
And the more chances, the more days that you can give someone who's in an active addiction to have an epiphany or hit that wall or get into the right program or situation, the higher the chance of recovery.
Of recovery. And I have heard this over and over again, all the people I've interviewed over the years. I'm like, what was the white light moment? They're like, what are you talking about? There wasn't. There's no white light moment. I just got sick of doing it. Like I just got like there's nobody can point to like what was the moment where, it's just like, okay, I had been to 25 treatment centers. And on the 26th, I picked up the phone to call the dealer and I was like, ugh, I don't want to do this anymore. And then they were ready. Why that day and not others? Most people can't tell you.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, and until you hit that moment, you're not going to go get sober. You're not. Period. That's the thing. You can't make anybody do what you want them to do. That's what Jessie taught me too. She's like, grown people, you can't tell grown people what to do. You know, it's like they're going to do their own thing, and that is the surrender moment for the family member to be like, okay,
Yeah.
you're not going to bend to my will.
Yeah. But that's what I think that's where the work for the rest of us is, right?
That's right.
In this,
That's right.
like, I can't control, I can't engineer certainty, I can't make choices on behalf of someone else.
Yep.
And yes, I can establish some boundaries, which is very different than what I think we've been told the boundaries have to be, which is like, you're out of here.
Or you're a doormat, you know,
Yeah.
or it's like not one or the other.
No.
And you mentioned the Center for Motivation and Change. I went to a weekend training that they do based on the workbook when I was researching the book. And it was like 2 8-hour days. And it was amazing. I was like, man, if I had known about this when Harris was alive, you know, they really break down communication, like red lights, green lights, what is productive to say, what's not productive to say. It's sort of like you have to practice. It's like, you know, I had a high school acting teacher who was like so woo-woo, and she taught us I statements. I learned I statements when I was 15, and it like was probably the best thing I ever learned in school. Like I learned at such a young age that I shouldn't say you suck, right? I should say
Right.
when you do so and so, it makes me feel this and such, right? So I learned that. You can learn how to speak in a way that is more amenable to positive relationships. You know, like it doesn't sort of like silence you in any way, but I think you do kind of need the playbook because it doesn't always feel natural. It feels, and it's also when somebody's doing something that you deem harmful, and it is, let's also be clear, somebody like shooting opioids and drinking themselves, you know, to death, that's not good. It's not good for them. It's not good for their bodies. And it causes a lot of emotion because I think I say in the book, if my 2-year-old gets near a body of water and they don't know how to swim, I am grabbing them, right? It is my instinct to protect and make sure that they aren't going to harm themselves. So it's not innate to be like, yeah, keep doing that thing that I know is bad for you. That's why it's hard. And so I think these resources are good because it gives you the language and the tools to do something that doesn't necessarily feel right.
Yeah. No, can feel like deeply antithetically against your better nature.
So bad. Yeah.
Oh, it's so hard. I just want everyone to do it. We think that they should do. The other, you know, we mentioned Narcan, but everyone should get Narcan. You can buy it over the counter. Make sure your kids, particularly if they're of that age, know how to administer it. It's very basic and simple.
Yeah, and one thing to say too is that if you see a box and it says naloxone, it's the same thing. So sometimes it'll be called Narcan, but if you see naloxone, same drug, same thing. So yes, everyone should have it. And you know, if you do administer it, you know, and they aren't revived, there's another dose in the box. Shoot the other nostril. Call 911, obviously, immediately.
But it won't harm them. But if they are revivable because of opioids, it will save their life.
Totally. It's like the Uma Thurman moment. You remember in Pulp Fiction?
Totally.
Comes back from the dead. Yeah.
It's, and it's something that everyone should know about. I mean, there was that Pitt episode that's so powerful. The kid studying, using something. It was like Adderall. I don't know. It's like all this stuff off the street is just mixed with crap. And who overdoses.
It
doesn't necessarily. Yeah. Oh, that whole show is so amazing.
Heartbreaking. Well, that's the other thing too. I mean, there's all these pill presses now, and the fentanyl stuff is awful, but if you have a pill, and they found this too, where you've got one pill, but it's not, the fentanyl isn't distributed evenly. So you could have, 4 kids who divide the pill into quarters, and they can each take a quarter, and one of the kids can die and the other is going to be fine. So it's so dangerous to be getting illicit pills. Any pills that are not coming from a prescriber, do not take them. Don't take them. Please don't take them.
Is there anything that you feel like we didn't cover off that you're like, I need people to understand this?
I think you have to look at this stuff and go into it with an open mind. I think you have to just know that you're going to read it and you're going to be like, "Ugh, what? No, that's crazy. That's wrong." It's just going to hit that. You just kind of be curious, like, okay, well, let me just like stick with it, and there's like degrees of. Like, I remember when we were doing the first season, which is what informed this whole book. Like, I remember talking to this guy, Sam Snodgrass, and he was like the first person that really said something in our conversation that made me think, oh, this is a disease. It was like, okay, light bulb, right? And then I sort of filed that away. And then a few interviews later, I was talking to Nzinga Harrison, who's the best. She's this addiction medicine doctor, and she gave me this 5-year timeline, right? And she taught me, 30 days is a drop in the bucket. 5 years is what we say. Just like breast cancer, you're not going to stop being surveilled until 5 years. And that was like another little light bulb. And, then like by episode 15, and somebody was like, don't use alone. And I was like, oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Don't use alone. Right. Because you don't want to die. Okay, cool. Like you kind of have to
baby step your way into it.
Yeah. You're reversing a lifetime of stigmatized information that you've gathered.
Yeah.
And so I just say, have an open mind and know that a lot of this stuff may seem radical, but it is quite practical.
One thing you didn't write about, which I thought was an interesting choice, and I'm curious about it, is you didn't write about iboga or some of the stuff happening in psychedelics on the addiction front. And for those who don't know what iboga is, it's a psychedelic. It's like a cousin of ayahuasca. It's from Gabon. It is now it's getting a ton of press because like Rick Perry and Joe Rogan, like the Manosphere has found it specifically. Yeah, and it's for PTSD, but also I first learned about it a long time ago in the context of addiction because what it seemed to do, and it can be very dangerous. It can stop people's hearts. It needs to be done. It needs to be done under supervision in the hospital. We talked about it on this TV show that we made a while ago, where Canada was working on this, but it blocks it essentially allows people to jump through withdrawal. It blocks has some sort of Suboxone effect, but it's also paired with a very intense and unsavory psychedelic experience that also seems to be profoundly healing for people. But at this point, it's not a widely available, accessible solution. But I'm curious about like just too big of a bite.
I mean, I really, in this book, am sticking to evidence-based, science-backed, like nothing. I think that's anything like that I think my take is, that's my personal take. If it's working for people, Godspeed and God bless. Like go forth and prosper. But really, like these medications that I talk about in the book have been here for so long. There's so much data, there's so much evidence around it, and it feels less. There is something about ibogaine and the whole experience that feels very like it needs to be heroic and hard. Right. Which I think for some people, great. That is what they need in order to like have a dark night of the soul with this this grandfather plant. And like, I'm with you. But it also is like you could just get a shot, and I'm like really trying to focus on things that like you're friendly neighborhood doctor could prescribe you.
Yeah.
You don't have to do under
You don't have to go to
supervision.
Mexico and
Yeah, but also
vomit in
like
a bucket.
go to
That's
Mexico
not
and vomit
your,
in a bucket. Like I
yeah.
mean, yeah, totally do it. Like I'm an enabler, Elise. I'm like, yeah, go. Have a great time. But for the book, it's really like what do we know is going to work, and what can an addiction medicine doctor prescribe you, and what can you take from the comfort and safety of your own home?
Yeah.
Because really, I think the thing that I just keep, I think if people took away one thing from the book, it's like I can have an opioid use disorder and I can be a productive member in society who lives in my home, in my community. I don't have to go away. I don't have to be sheltered in a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day program. I can manage this disease with a doctor like I would manage any other disease. And it can be a chronic illness that I am managing as a human being who lives in a human body. And one of the things that Sam Snodgrass said to me early on that I love, and I'll leave you with this, is I was like, what are the risk factors for addiction? And he was like, being human.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, got it. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, okay. So that's okay. I live in a human body. I'm susceptible to it. Great. Like, how can I manage it? And that's what I want people to take away. You know, it's not a death sentence. You're not a terrible person. You're a human in a human body.
Yeah.
You have this thing and it's going to be fine. And there's ways to treat it. And the book will tell you how.
I'm really grateful to Steph for writing this book. It's probably not a book that anyone is like, this will be a fun project, but it's really well done and very, very practical. So there is some history, some philosophical overview, frameworking around how to think about this, but then there's also a lot of resources. And if you or someone you love is contending with this, either is an active phase of addiction or love someone who is in an active phase of addiction, this is a great book. It's not a workbook, it's a book, but it's not super long. And I think it will make someone feel supported and less alone and like they understand both the landscape of treatments, but also options. So, and I will, as mentioned, include links on the episode page on my website to all my other conversations in this space, as well as some other resources. All right, friends, I'll see you next time.